Hello, hi. We're here. We're welcome. We're live. I think we're good to go. Um, my name is Maria Salazar. I am the founder of Claymore Vets, and today I have the honor of having Lucy Delgadio, who is my sister in arms, my army friend, also our vice chair for all the hats she wears. And our guest of honor is retired Colonel Edna Cummings, who is the champion and activist for the gold medal for the Postal Battalion. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves while I do a little bit of admin work. And once again, thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited to have you both here.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm Lucy. Hi, I'm Lucy Delgadio. I am a U.S. Army veteran, and I have the honor of being the vice chair of Claymore Vets. Again, when Maria asked me to join this wonderful venture, I jumped on it really, really quickly. Because I know the passion that she brings behind Claymore Vets, but more so what Claymore Vets does for our veterans who are involved in the arts and what the arts therapy does for our veterans. And I'm so honored to pass the mic now to Colonel Retired Cummings. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
But thanks to you both for having me, and I appreciate everything that you do to bring forth the voice for our women veterans. And I'm honored to share the story of the 6888. This is my fourth year working on behalf of the 6888. I started out as a fundraiser for the monument that's at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and I'll share more about that in the presentation. And it just continued to evolve. People are so interested and passionate about this history that few knew about. So I'm just honored to be part of a great team that's expanded, and now Claymore Vets, you're part of our team, part of our family, for embracing the story. And I appreciate everything that you are doing. And thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're so honored that we get to share the story of these amazing women because they paved the way for us. We wouldn't be here had they not had the courage to step up to serve, you know? So I'll show the video and then we'll jump right into it.
In Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia.
We called it 6888 CPD.
That's when I was overseas with 6888.
We call it the 6888.
The entire country was mobilized in support of the World War.
In July 1943, General Eisenhower had asked for women to be sent to him, and auxiliaries were not allowed to be sent overseas. So at that time, they started to create the WAC bill, the Women's Army Corps bill.
I said, a WAC? I said, I had a cousin that was a WAC. She said, really?
Many of the women in World War II were recruited because of their skills. But at the same time, I sometimes wonder how much they don't really realize what role models they are for the generations of women that come behind them.
White people never expected anything of us. You see, so when you got out there and did something that was extraordinary, they said somebody else must have done that.
While telling that story and documenting what these particular military units, that in most cases were all military, were all black, and most of the time they had a white commander, but those soldiers still performed at the same level as their white counterparts in terms of defending and providing for the democracy of this country.
Wow. I'm so, every time I see that, it touches me so much. I can't imagine having the courage to step up back then, you know, especially back then. So we'll just jump right into the presentation. And you just let me know when you want me to
No, sure.
pass pages.
Yeah, go to the landing, the first slide. You like on slide number 4?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So again, thank you so much for taking time out to learn more about the 6888. And with this presentation, I'd like to share with you the path to the 6888 Congressional Gold Medal. The Gold Medal is the nation's highest award, and I'll share more information about the Gold Medal and the impact that the 6888 will have by receiving this award. Next slide, please. This just gives you an overview of what I will cover this evening. I will talk about the Women's Army Corps, the 6888, and some of the recognitions, and provide some references and media about the 6888's accomplishments and overall path to receiving this award. Next slide, please. All right. During World War II, the goal of women serving in the military was to release men for combat. The only branch of the military that actually had women in the military was the Women's Army Corps. The other services had women as volunteers, but what's important to note that during World War II, more than 300,000 women served in or with the military, with the Army having the largest number with 150,000 women who were actually considered in the military and not in auxiliary or volunteers. And there was also quite a bit of diversity within the ranks for the women. We had Japanese American women who served. On the right-hand lower left, you see 100 Puerto Rican women trained for Women's Army Corps training at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. I learned we had code girls. Code girls were cryptographers. And there was about 10,000 code girls with a few Black women who served, and over 600,000 Black Rosie the Riveters. Rosie the Riveters were civilian women who worked in the factories to help the war effort within the United States. Next slide, please. I will not read this slide, I promise you, but just to give you an idea of the origins of the Women's Army Corps, and it started in 1941. World War II started in 39, and in May 41, Representative Edith North Rogers of Massachusetts introduced a bill for the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. Now keep in mind the women were not in the military, they were with the military. May 42, the actual WAC, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, was created, but they did not have military status, meaning that they were with the military, but not in the military. So First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune advocated for African-American women to join the auxiliaries. And also there was an effort to get them more involved in the war effort overseas. So in July 42, the first auxiliary recruits from the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps started basic training. And Captain Charity Adams was the first Black WAC officer. The Women's Army Corps was not created until 1943, and it wasn't disbanded until 1978. And what's not on this timeline is two significant acts. One was Truman's order to integrate the military in 1948, and also the Women's Armed Services Integration Act of 1948 that integrated women into the military. Next slide. All right. So with the Black women who joined the military, there was a limit of 10%. And during the war, there were more than 6,000 African-American women who served in the Army. And due to enforced segregation known as Jim Crow laws, the recruitment was limited to 10%, which matched the percentage of African Americans in the population. The Army's policy reflected the society's policy for separate facilities for Blacks and whites. Next slide. Black WACs were stationed throughout the United States at all these locations, and I think it's absolutely remarkable to know that during World War II, we had African-American women in the military at these locations. And Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia was a significant training site for overseas training for the unit that was later to be called the 6888. Next slide. All right. The black whites in the United States had extremely harsh treatment. Many of them were beaten and imprisoned for refusing to perform menial tasks and standing up for civil rights. In 1945, 4 black white privates participated in a strike at Fort Devens, and what's not really talked about, one of these women actually committed suicide. And there's a book called Glory in Their Spirit that captures the story of these black white privates who staged this strike at Fort Devens. And in July 1945, police officers beat 3 black women, or 3 black whites, for sitting in a whites-only Greyhound bus station in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Next slide. So with the volume of women in the military, as I mentioned, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, Eleanor Roosevelt advocated for black whites to go overseas. And there was a big push beginning in the mid-44 for African American women to serve overseas like their white counterparts. Next slide. All right. So with this recruitment, women were identified to go overseas. Keep in mind, they did not know what their mission was, where they were going and what they were going to do. But this was the 40s, 1945, and you had thousands of black women in the military, and only a handful were selected to go overseas. Prior to going overseas or deploying overseas, they had to undergo psychological testing and 2 weeks of training at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. And I had the opportunity to go to Fort Oglethorpe and walk the grounds where the 6888 trained. You see circled the block 1400. The park ranger there was great about just showing where the women train. And what's interesting about this park, it's called Chattanooga National Military Park, and there's also a Civil War battleground. So it's kind of ironic where the Civil War battle was fought. You had the 6888 training in this site, but when they went to this training site, it was classified. They could not reveal where they were going or why they were going to this training site. Next slide. So when the 6888, they were not called the 6888 then, but when the black women who were identified to deploy overseas completed the training at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, they then went to Camp Shanks, New York. And this is, a nice shot of some of the members who were later to be known as the 6888 at a Camp Shanks, just waiting to board the ship to go to Europe. Next slide. All right. When the 6888 set sail, they set sail in 2 groups. The largest contingent departed on or about the 2nd of February in 1945. And en route to Europe, they had close calls with the Germans, even though the Army tried to keep their deployment secret. Germans found out that these women, or not necessarily women, but this ship was carrying military personnel to Europe. So they had some close calls with German U-boats, and they eventually landed in Scotland before they took a train to Birmingham, England. And what I thought was very interesting, I located this excerpt from Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. She did not attend the departure, but she said, "You represent 15 million of us. Your success in this courageous service is ours. Think well, carve a niche for those who follow you." And this emphasized my thoughts all along that the 6888's journey to Europe was not about them. They realized they had a larger mission. They were paving the way for others to follow. Next slide. So I located this article where you can see that the 6888 reached the United Kingdom. And what's really interesting, they left on about the 2nd or 3rd of February, arrived in Birmingham, England on the 12th. And 2 days later, after 11 days at sea, being chased by German U-boats, they had to get ready for a pass and review or to march because General Lee, who was the communication zone commander, wanted to see if these troops could march. And Charity Adams said, "You've never seen a group of finer marching soldiers in your life." And she proved that to be very true. And this is the iconic photo on the 15th where they got ready for inspection at the King Edward School for Boys in Birmingham, England. Next slide. All right. So the 6888 set sail for the European theater of operations and arrived. And the reason they were sent to Europe was because of a massive mail backlog. It was in chaos. It was total chaos. 2 to 3 years of backlog mail because of the rapid movement of troops after D-Day. The European Theater of Operations, or ETO, did not have qualified postal officers. And this is an image showing white wax attempting to sort through the mail. And I located an article about 2 or 3 weeks ago where a month before the 6888 showed up, a Black unit who had served at Normandy unloaded 3,600 tons of mail in 5 days. They even set records unloading the mail. And that equated to 130,000 bags of mail. And I took some time to do some math, 130,000 bags of undelivered mail, each bag weighing about 70 pounds. Each letter is about, a little less than half a pound. So you can see there was a lot of backlog mail. Next slide. All right. There's more information about the impact of undelivered mail. We hear about the mail causing problems now, but imagine if during World War II, mail was the primary source of communication. It was that vital link between families and the troops in Europe. So 7 million Americans in the European Theater of Operations. And this is a couple of pictures of just the mass amount of undelivered mail. What complicated the mail sorting and delivery, a lot of personnel on the ETO shared common names such as Robert Smith. And due to the literacy level at the time, some letters were only addressed as Buster or Junior. And this chaotic mail and lack of reliable mail service caused morale to plummet. And the leadership was concerned that if this morale was not uplifted or turned around, the Allied victory would be at risk. We celebrate D-Day, but that did not end the war. That was just a major battle or a catalytic battle in World War II. The war didn't end until September 45. So the morale had plummeted in the European Theater of Operations because of the lack of reliable mail service. Next slide. So as veterans, one thing that we're taught, or that I was taught, was to analyze a situation, identify the problem and the conditions and solutions. So I took some time to do this with the 6888. So as I mentioned before, you had several years of backlog mail. And this mail had been stored in rat-infested aircraft hangars. The 6888 had to work in cold buildings with blackout curtains to prevent enemy detections. So what the commander did, she set up a system to organize the work schedule in 3 shifts to sort this mail, in other words, round-the-clock operations. So the 6888 processed 65,000 pieces of mail per shift. And that's 195,000 pieces of mail and packages on every day. And they did that for approximately 90 days. And I'm sure there were peaks where it wasn't 195,000 pieces of mail every day, but based on what I showed you in the previous slides, with the amount of mail that was stored in warehouses or just the amount that had been offloaded in France, that was a lot of mail. And once they completed the mail sorting in Birmingham, England, they moved on to Rouen and Paris, France to do the same thing. And on the right, one of the veterans who's deceased now had a newsletter. And in this newsletter for the Women's Army Corps said the Negro WAC was one of the best units, if not the best WAC unit in the military, not the best Negro, colored, or black WAC unit, just the best, period. And what's interesting, that's pretty much all the things that they receive after restoring the troop morale in Birmingham, England, Rouen, and Paris. Next slide. All right. So this was an overview of the chain of command. When the 688 arrived at peak strength, there were about 855 personnel, 31 officers, 824 enlisted. You saw she was Captain Charity Adams at the time, who was the first Black woman to receive a commission in the Army. On the left, the president or the commander-in-chief was President Roosevelt. He died while in office, and then Truman took over. There was only one colonel in the Women's Army Corps, and that was the WAC director. The commanding general of the European Theater of Operations was General Eisenhower, and General Lee was a communication zone commander. And then had a WAC director in Europe and the battalion commander. So I had the opportunity of meeting one of the officers in the 6888, and she's pictured. That was Major Fannie McClendon. What's interesting about Major McClendon, you see on the chart, she was a first lieutenant in the Army. When she came back to the United States, she was out for about a year, and she got a letter asking her to come back in the military. So she joined the Air Force. So she started her career as a lieutenant and retired as a major in the Air Force, and just broke ground in the Air Force, as a woman and as an African-American woman in 1971 when she retired. She's now 101. Next slide. You heard me talk about Major Charity Adams, and one thing that drew me to that story, I didn't learn about the 6888 until around 2016, and I read online about a Black colonel named Edna who had quite a few challenges in the military, and needless to say, as a retired Army officer, I related to a lot of the challenges that she experienced. She was born in North Carolina, grew up in South Carolina, and as I mentioned, she was the first African-American woman to be an officer in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. Now, she commanded the 6888 at 26 years old. Most battalion commanders now have been in the Army about 17 or 18 years. She'd been in the Army about 3 years when she took over the 6888. And even before she deployed to Europe, she was reprimanded for race mixing. She accepted an invitation to accompany one of her white officers to the officers club, and she was reprimanded for race mixing. That was a crime. When she was in Birmingham, England, I mentioned to you about the shift work, the 3 shifts. A general showed up and wanted to inspect her troops. She said, "Sir, I have a group sleeping, a group working, so I only have a third available for inspection." And he was offended because this major, especially a Black woman, refused to obey his order. And he said, "I'm going to send a white first lieutenant down here to show you how to run this unit." And she responded, "Over my dead body." Now, regardless of rank or gender, you do not tell a general over my dead body. So she was concerned about the repercussions of her statement, but nothing happened. He actually apologized to her, and that's something that I could relate to in the military, and I'm sure a lot of veterans have experienced the same thing, where senior officers later apologized for being wrong, and you had to stand up for what you thought was right. And also, she refused Red Cross segregated recreational facilities. So in the 40s, you have a 26-year-old as a battalion commander standing up to the leadership, and that's how she gained a lot of respect from her troops and respect from the military, because she stood up for her troops. And in December 45, she was promoted to lieutenant colonel. I retired as a full colonel. She made colonel in about 3.5 years, and it took me 18 years. And I've heard of battlefield promotions, but this was an extraordinary, talented person, regardless, again, of race or gender. And as I showed to you before, the highest rank available was the next rank of colonel. So she was one of the highest ranking women in World War II. Next slide. All right. So while in Birmingham, England, I discussed how the 6888 sorted the mail and they devised an efficient system, but they experienced freedoms that they did not have in the United States. They were welcomed by the locals, formed sports teams and entertainment groups, and even more so, they had to set up their own cities, kind of like a mobile postal team and a mobile garrison team, because they were self-sustaining. They took care of their own cooking, logistics, driving, hair salons, maintained their own equipment. Again, another remarkable task for these women. Next slide. So after Birmingham, England, they deployed to France. May 8th was VE Day, or Victory in Europe. And this iconic photo shows the 6888 marching again in France in the Joan of Arc parade. In July 45, 3 women were killed in a Jeep accident in Rouen, France. Now, there are only 4 women buried at Normandy, and 3 are from the 6888. Normandy has not over 9,000 graves there, and only 4 women. And the Army didn't return a lot of the bodies back from the war. But what's sad about these 3 women, the Army refused to pay for their burials. So Charity Adams, the 6888 commander, had to take up a donation to give these 3 women a decent burial, and they're still over there. So in August 1945, some of the women returned to the United States. September 45, that was the end of the war, World War II Allied victory. And the last of the unit returned home in February 46 without any type of recognition for their service. So, I mean, it could be said that they were they saved the war by restoring the troop morale. I mean, not single-handedly, but they contributed to our Allied victory in World War II and never received any thanks. And in March 46, the unit was deactivated. Next slide. All right. And one thing I like to also mention within the 6888, the diversity within the unit. An earlier slide, I showed you some of the diversity within the women who served and volunteered during World War II, the Japanese American women and some of the Puerto Rican women. And within the 6888, we had 2 women who identified as African American, even though they were Afro-Latina. A lot of the women in 6888 had to travel north to join the military due to Jim Crow segregation laws. And there's a list of 6888 women, and you will see most of them are from, they joined the Army in New York and New Jersey and northern states. But these 2 women, on the top is Lydia Thornton, who is deceased. She was originally born in Mexico and lived in Arizona. After the war, she became a translator for Olympic boxers. Below is Crescencia Garcia, who was born in Puerto Rico. She lives in New York, and it was just an honor to have her recognized at Carnegie Hall during Veterans Day for her efforts, and her family was just overwhelmed. And I have a link to the article where she was recognized at Carnegie Hall. She actually got a standing ovation. Next slide. All right. 75 years later, the 6888 is finally getting their long overdue recognition. I joined the 6888 effort in 2018. I volunteered to raise funds for this monument on the left that was dedicated to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas in 2018. 5 of the veterans who were alive at that time showed up. The project director for the monument, Commander Carlton Philpott, also worked with Congress to award the 6888 their only performance award. They received the campaign medals, World War II Victory Medal, Women's Army Corps Award, and just the standard medals you get just by being in the military at a certain time. But they never received anything for commendation. So in 2019, they received the Meritorious Unit Commendation. And while I was working on the 6888 monument along with another veteran, Elizabeth Helm Frazier, a producer, Jim Theris, contacted us and asked for our help to produce this documentary, and we released that in 2019. Okay, next slide. Miss Indiana Hunt Martin, she's deceased now. Along with the recognitions that I mentioned on the previous slide, there's a renaming effort for Buffalo, New York Post Office. So that legislation was introduced in May 2021 to rename the post office in Buffalo, New York after Miss Indiana Hunt Martin. And you see her highlighted in the lower right here. She's in the iconic photo. Next slide. We also attended a production tour, and thanks to social media, I cannot thank social media enough, because the U.S. Embassy saw one of my posts and invited our production team to the United Kingdom to tour the documentary, to screen the documentary. So I was able to go to Scotland and Manchester, and the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom, Robert W. Johnson, dedicated a blue plaque at the King Edward School where the 6888 was stationed. And you saw the inspection photo that's at the King Edward School in Birmingham that now has a blue plaque there. While I was working on the documentary, Jim Theris, who had worked on another film called Hello Girls about World War I women, suggested that we introduce a Congressional Gold Medal. And that's what we did. And we introduced the bill in 2019. It didn't pass. It passed the Senate. It did not pass the House of Representatives last session of Congress. And it was reintroduced in February 2021. And we are fighting hard to get this bill passed. And I'll give you more information about that shortly, because you can see that approximately 325,000 veterans are alive. And this was as of May 2020. And pre-COVID, about 245 World War II veterans died daily. So again, a sense of urgency to get this bill passed. Next slide. Now, about the Congressional Gold Medal. All right, since the American Revolution, Congress commissioned medals as an expression of appreciation for distinguishing achievements. The first medal was awarded to George Washington in 1776, and since then, less than 200 have been awarded. So when the 6888 receives the Congressional Gold Medal, a medal will be struck similar to these medals awarded to the Tuskegee Airmen, the Women's Air Service pilots, the Navajo Code Talkers, and the Montfort Marines. Next slide. And so why should the 6888 receive the Congressional Gold Medal? I like to say they prevailed where others failed. So when awarded, the 6888 will be the only military unit that was able to clear the mail backlog. You saw images of other WACs trying to clear the backlog. There were other postal units in the area, but no one else could get the job done. They exceeded performance standards and cleared the backlog in 3 months instead of the 6-month goal. And when they receive the Congressional Gold Medal, they will be the only female unit with military status while serving to receive the Congressional Gold Medal. The Women's Air Service pilot received the Congressional Gold Medal, but they did not obtain veteran status until 1977. And of course, they would be the only African-American WAC unit to receive this honor. Next slide. All right. The status of the Congressional Gold Medal. It's passed the Senate twice. And I'm not going to read the slide to you, but Senator Jerry Moran from Kansas introduced the bill in 2019 and again in 2021. Senator Moran is from Kansas. Kansas is the home of the Buffalo Soldiers, and he credits the 688 for keeping his family together while his father was overseas as a World War II veteran. If you get the opportunity to go to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, please go to the Buffalo Soldier Park. There are monuments to historic African Americans, General Colin Powell, Henry Flipper, and other distinguished African Americans who served, in the military. Next slide. HR 1012 is the House counterpart. In order for a bill to pass, it has to have 2/3 support from the Senate and the House. So the bill passed the Senate. It has 2/3 co-sponsors to go to vote. Fortunately, the Congressional Gold Medal is scheduled to go to vote Monday. Hopefully it'll pass. It has a 2/3 supporters. So I am just awaiting word that the bill has passed. I'll probably be glued to the television on Monday afternoon watching C-SPAN for the vote. So this is Representative Gwendolyn Moore from Wisconsin. What's interesting, the way Representative Moore introduced this bill, one of the 688 veterans is from Wisconsin. And when I was looking for someone to introduce the bill, Senator Moran was on board. I had to find someone from the House, and a family member, made the connection to Representative Moore. Okay, next slide. All right. This is just a summary. One of my friends who wrote a book called Girls Who Stepped Out of Line has this picture of, this is Liz, you heard me talk about her, retired Master Sergeant. She and I, my sister in arms for the Congressional Gold Medal, the 688 recognitions. The 688 stepped out of line, especially the commander, and changed the course of history. Next slide. All right. Some references in the media that you may be interested in. I talked about the 4 Black women who took on the Army. That's the first book. Charity Adams wrote a book, One Woman's Army. Dr. Brenda Moore, and just some other references. I will not read all of those to you, but just want to give you an idea of how you can learn more about the 688. Okay, next slide. All right. Please follow me on social media. I cannot thank my social media family, because thanks to social media, I believe, Maria, that's where I located you on Facebook, or you located me. I'm not sure how that happened. So it works to help spread the word and educate the public about these phenomenal women and others who served during World War II. Thank you so very much for your time. I hope that I shared some information about the 688 that you didn't otherwise know.
We sure did. It was such an informative presentation. But something that you really said that kept driving home for me was that you were saying like they single-handedly saved the war because they brought up the troops, was the
Morale.
word? Yeah, morale, exactly. And I remember, right, when I deployed to Iraq in 2003, I mean, this was like the Wild Wild West, right? Like the mail was the last thing in anybody's mind, right? And so when it was mail call, like all of us, you run up and you're like hoping, like you're praying that you get a letter, right? And when you don't, like you get this like stab in your heart, and you see somebody else getting packages, and then you don't. It really does bring you down. And then you have to go back out the next day on a convoy to deliver, mail and food and beans for somebody else, but you didn't. So yeah, they did save the war themselves, because that right there, when you get the letter from your mom, your, dear Johnny or whoever, it makes you fight harder.
It does.
So like that really brought it home for me. I think that, thank you so much. It was so amazing.
But Maria, what was so even more challenging for them is the conditions the mail was in, because that mail was sitting there. So the mail was infested with rodents. It was stuck together at some times. It was wet. They had to read names that they couldn't barely read because of the deterioration. So their feat was a challenge, and they were resilient, and they got that mail out. And it is so incredible that that's what these women did, and it's so important and so valued that, again, it's not just a morale thing. It was just, they did everything. And that's what's so incredible about the story. And like you, Maria, I mean, I used to sit and wait for my mail to come in. And, my abuela, my grandmother, managed to pay an exuberant amount of money to get a FedEx package to me of rice and beans with platanitos. And I remember when that FedEx box came, everybody was like running. They're like, Lucy got Cuban food. And everybody was running toward it. And she put it in dry ice. And we were so excited to get that. But so just imagine, that's in, Desert Storm time. Imagine the conditions they were experiencing. So, thank you, ma'am, for just your knowledge, but so much just the heart you put into this effort, because this is history. We need to know this, because they created the way for women to join the military, and not and all of us, and so valued. But one question I have is about, again, the Latinas, the Afro-Latinas, and how they were put into this battalion, not just because of being Latina, but their skin color. Could you talk a little bit more about that for us?
Well, with the two women I spoke to, the two who I mentioned, with the Alva Moore Stevenson, her mom was Afro-Latina, but from Mexico. She had a choice to join the Black Regiment or the White Regiment. And her family was interracial, and she chose the Black Regiment. So she chose to be with the Black Regiment. And with Crescencia Garcia, when she arrived to the 688, she was on that roster. She was sent someplace else, because just like any other military assignment, you get the orders and you show up and they send you off. But her family shares that while she was in the military, because of her skin tone, she was placed with the Black units. So it was a challenge. But just what's so interesting is how the women worked together. They helped each other in ways that I don't think any of us could probably understand, because you think with the 855 women, you didn't have any training in postal operations. And that was a lot for a 26-year-old person. And we know it was a no-fail mission. So when we talk about race with the 6888, it's like, look, we want to get the mail out and prove that we could serve. And they just did not care. And what helped, when they went to the city of Birmingham, they were treated like people. They had freedom of movement. When they went to Paris, can you imagine anybody going to Paris? In 2020, all of the shops and just the novelty of being in a foreign country, and nobody cares. They care that you're an American. They care that you're there to help. You've earned their respect just by being in uniform. But then you come back to the military, all that's eroded. And what was not discussed is that the military police, the women could not carry weapons, so they could only carry batons. So what the commander did, she had them learn martial arts, because there are a lot of curious onlookers. I'll just leave it at that. So she wanted the women to be able to defend themselves. So I thought that was interesting. I'm like, even then, that was an issue that the commander had to address. How can I keep these women safe? Because as we put together, they fought sexism, racism, and the Nazis. One of the veterans, the one who's having the post office named after her, she was hilarious, and she passed away. But she mentioned that around the building where they were working, they had trenches, just in case something happened, and throughout, different areas, there were trenches to jump in, like for protection if something happened, some bombs, artillery or whatever came in. A lot of the bombing was over, but you still heard little skirmishes in the distance. So it says, hey, if something happens, you jump in these trenches. But these all are multi-purpose trenches. They were also used for latrines.
Oh
I know. So she said there was no way I was going to jump in a trench for anything. I would just, surrender. So these are the things that you will never read about in the history books. But the oral histories and just the opportunity to go on this journey, and I call it an eye-opening journey, with the 6888 women and their families, and even their families didn't know a lot of this information because, Maria, as you mentioned, it was such a stigma. I mean, it's a stigma now for a female to be in the military. And you just think the Women's Army Corps wasn't disbanded until 1978. And we're just now opening up roles to women to be treated as, all right, if you can perform, if you can complete this task to standard, you can serve. So you're not going to be set aside. I mean, this is just happening, 70 plus years after World War II. We're still having these same conversations that the 6888 had. So I just saw so many parallels, but it gives a good evolution, not only for African American women, because the Army was the first to allow African American women. The Air Force was part of the Army at the time. So technically the Air Force did have, African American women because it was the U.S. Army, Armed Forces, U.S. Army Air at the time. But the Marines, I believe it was, 47, 48. The Navy was, if I'm not mistaken, 44 before it allowed Black women. So Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune's statement about you representing 15 million of us was far-reaching because, I'm sorry, Marines, the Army led the way.
But the only time y'all beat us.
There's 2 against 1 tonight, Maria.
I know, but I can tell you,
that's the only time.
My right arm through this Congressional Gold Medal has been Master Gunny Joe Jeter from the Montford Point Marines. He's held my hand. I have him on speed dial because the Montford Point Marines, he led the effort for the Congressional Gold Medal. So he gave me his playbook and I just thank him dearly. So to that point, Marines, you did lead the way for the Congressional Gold Medal, and Joe Jeter's just been phenomenal. So.
But isn't it a shame that still today in 2022, we're still facing sexism, we're still facing racism, and the culture doesn't change. And, so many of the discussions is, the shift in trying to, obliterate the toxic leadership that takes place in the military. And these women exhibit it to us that they beat the sexism, they beat the racism, they stood tall, they did their job, they did it with such conviction and duty. And we still today, as women of color, as women, we still have to face the racial slurs, the sexual slurs we face, and people don't realize that. And that's like so much education that comes in place when we are sending our daughters and our nieces and our granddaughters into the military, that these are possible, things that they're going to face. And what I love about the story that the 6888 gives you is it gives you hope. It gives you, they did their job and they did it very valiantly, but they went to Birmingham, they were accepted, as peers, they were locals, they became all this. And this is what people need to learn about, because we share these historical military stories, but we leave these equations out that are so important, because this is what the military looks like. It looked like then, it still looks like now, and we need to know this. And so again, the way you and the others that are championing the story and getting it out there, it's so important.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm thank you for the bottom of my heart, because I feel like awareness is the ground work that we have to do, right? Especially within our community. Like you said, I think for the younger generations, because we're out now, right? But the women that are in the military now, they get to be the links that break the chain, because they're still in, right? We can only see from the outside and be like, hey guys, do it this way, or try to change this, right? But at the end of the day, they got the baton now, basically, and conversations like these is important. They're important because this is the way that we shift the paradigms, you know, and then also to have like male veterans, like the guys in the audience right now that are here supporting us, because we can't demand, or we can't have change without our brothers standing next to us. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like a
absolutely.
teamwork, it's a team effort. And this is why I'm excited to have these type of conversations. And I'm so thankful that both of you said yes. Because I'm like, hey, you guys want to do this? I'm like, yeah, all right. So,
Oh,
you
sure.
know, funny if I keep having these like parallels to my time in Iraq, but the similar thing happened with us over there, because you know, we were under, you know, like we can't shoot at anybody or anything unless we get
Mhm.
shot at, right? So when you're on convoys and they're like, especially like the it was the reverse on that side, but like if you see like females with the shorts, you know, their arms or whatever, they're trying to ask you to like show them more, but you can't do anything. So I used to walk around with my bat on the back of my 7-ton. You know, I was like, what do you want me to show you? My bat? Okay.
Wow. Wow.
You know,
Yes,
but
sir.
it still happens. Like how many 50 years
I
later,
know
60
it's
years later,
history.
it still happens,
Yeah.
you know?
But what's interesting, I wish I would have learned about the 688, because when you take military history courses, it's one narrative. But maybe I have the time now, I don't know. But I just believe that if you introduce topics with a diverse narrative, people would pay attention.
Yeah.
Because now I watch the History Channel like crazy, because I'm trying to pick up something about the 688. I can relate it. And there's just so many stories in World War II now that I read differently. I go back and reread information. I'm like, okay, it's all making sense now about the backlog of mail and about D-Day and the troop movement. I track that now because I can connect it to something.
Right.
I don't have any chats or questions from the audience. I don't have a chat on my side, so I don't know if there's any from the audience.
If you can see it on the side, Kelly
Yeah,
Atkinson,
I don't
he's
have.
the vice president of the Montfort Point Marines, the New Jersey chapter.
Mhm.
He was giving you the dates of the Marines. It was 1949 when
Right.
women were allowed.
1949. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank
So,
you. Yeah, I don't have the chats on my side. I don't have that.
oh, you don't?
No, but that's okay. You can. So I appreciate that. Yeah, 1949. But
Yeah.
mhm,
And then Gina, she's another one of our board members.
mhm.
She's agreeing with you, and she's thanking you for
Yeah,
such
thank
an
you.
informative presentation. There's more up
But
here.
ma'am, could you after after Monday, because I feel it in my heart that it's
It's
going to
gonna
happen
pass.
Monday. It's going to
Yeah.
pass on Monday. What type of celebrations and what type of what do you think the next wave is going to look like for more education about the 6888?
Well, once the bill passes, and I'll speak in the affirmative, it has to go to the president for signature, and the president has 10 days to sign the bill. I've asked for a signing ceremony to be televised or something, but I don't control what happens in the White House. I can only have a wish list. But I've talked to Phyllis today, actually, and we're planning in mid-June, around the 15th of June, to have a huge event at the Women's Memorial at Arlington Cemetery. So for everyone, we'll put out more information. Arlington Cemetery, it's in Washington, well, outside of Washington, D.C. There's a metro station there. And the Women's Memorial is at the end of Arlington Cemetery. So we're planning a 6888 day on or about June 15th.
Perfect.
So, and, we welcome sponsorships because we plan to have entertainment. The Congressional Gold Medal actually takes about a year to mint. So I'm hoping to get a signed copy of the bill so we can present to family members and anybody else who wants one for your personal museum. And we just want to have a day of celebration because, as I mentioned, the 6888 would be the only women's unit who served in a military status to receive this honor. So that's remarkable of all the contributions of women to our national security in the military. The 6888, is the only unit. The Congressional Gold Medal goes to civilians. I mean, Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King, like I said, George Washington was the first recipient. So it's just not military units. But I'll just feel great that this vision is now a reality.
So for the people listening or the ones that will
Mhm.
catch the replay,
Right.
how can we support you? Do you guys need, obviously you need some funding. How can they donate?
Well, what
Anybody wants to help you out?
But this is the first time I'm not going to accept the funding because most organizations, this course, it's just spent time for us, a lot of emails. But now, if you wish to donate, you can go to the Women's Memorial and make a donation. And in your comments at 6888. And I've already told Phyllis that, hey, I will mention this. So if you want to donate something towards the event in June, or as an organization, you may want some type of sponsorship on her web page, the Women's Memorial web page. So you can contact Phyllis and maybe talk to her directly. But for everyone else, Women's Memorial, just donate for the 6888, and Phyllis will know. And I say Phyllis, she's president of the Women's Memorial, a retired warrant officer. She will know what it's for. So thank you so much for mentioning that. I completely forgot.
And I have to also mention that if you haven't gone to WIMSA, to Women's Memorial, please do so. It is such an important part of women in military history. You learn so much. There's little details. I mean, it's just a breathtaking memorial. Phyllis Wilson has put so much passion, and right now it's getting a little refurbish going on. But again, support the Women's Memorial because you're supporting women in military, and for our service, they're still looking for more women to collect their stories. So the official name of the memorial is, hold on, I just got the calendar in the mail today. It's the Women in Military Service Memorial. Hold on, I got my calendar today. Here it is. So it is the Military Women's Memorial. Okay, and that's what it looks like. It's right outside of Arlington. When you go in, if you go in through the Arlington Cemetery Guest Visitors Center and you walk out of it, it's directly there. It's this beautiful, people think it's just part of the cemetery. It's actually our memorial. And it is breathtaking. I definitely ask everybody to support the memorial. Again, support the 6888's exhibit there. They also do small snippets of the film, and it is such an amazing organization. And Phyllis Wilson does a fantastic job in keeping the memorial going. So thank you for Kelly for asking for the official name. And I ask everybody to go visit while you're in DC. It's one of the hidden gems of DC.
It is. Yeah, and register your service as a
yes,
veteran.
Register your service, register your story if you haven't registered your story as a woman veteran.
I had a question. So once the bill passes, what's the next step? How are you guys going to be? I guess you guys have already contacted a list of the families, right?
Yes. Yeah, we have a list of the families. We'll just submit, a blast on social media. The bill is passed, and working to get a signed copy of the bill, and just hopefully everyone shows up on the 15th so we can honor. But what we will do, there's 6 veterans still alive that we know of. So what we plan to do, because these veterans cannot travel, I mean, they're in 101, 99. So what I will like to do for the 6 cities is have a local legislator present them a signed copy of the bill and have maybe a day to recognize that veteran in that city. So that's my plan.
We have some of them in New Jersey, don't we?
Well, there was one, but I believe she moved to Florida. So the city would be outside of Phoenix, Arizona. There is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Okay, that's 2. There's one in Vegas, Las Vegas, who was on today's show, by the way. Oh. There's one in outside of, I think she's in Queens, New York. So that's 4. Florida. And then there is, Wisconsin. Yeah, so
Okay.
that's 6.
So
I got all 6.
We can manage the queens.
Yes, that's what it. See, we're here.
We're here.
So the
We're
queen
here, so we can manage the
happened
queens
to
one.
us.
Well, yeah, I'll put something out
Yeah.
because it depends on the local, community. The American Legion has been very supportive, and just, of course, the Montfort Point Marines, and there's so many of the veterans organizations, Foundation for Women Warriors. So the veterans in those cities will, get their recognition, and then we're inviting the families to, come to DC, those who can, but if not, you can have your own celebration. We welcome a party. So wherever you are, you can just celebrate where you are, because there's a list of the veterans from each state. They joined from throughout the United States. We even had a veteran join from Montana. 6AAA. Nothing wrong with nothing against Montana, but just show the diversity, the regional diversity within the 6AAA. So hopefully these states where the women join and where the women live will recognize the 6AAA. Oh, Montgomery, Alabama. That's the other one. Okay. Outside of Alabama, that's the 6th one. Yeah, Alabama. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but listen, for New York, yeah, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of support here. So,
awesome.
But do you have any more questions? I don't see any. I don't want to keep you. I would talk to you.
With time. Yeah, because
I know.
We were.
Well, everyone can contact me on social media with additional questions or follow up, and I just thank you for what you're doing, especially with the arts. The 6AAA even used the performing arts as a way to embrace what they were doing, because it was obviously challenging. So that arts outlet was very beneficial. So thank you for what you're doing, and I appreciate you all's time. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me.
Ma'am, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. We are so blessed and honored that you joined us this evening. And again, please, all of you watching, support the 6AAA, and also, find Colonel Retired Cummings on social media and show her love and show the 6AAA love. And remember to give Claymore vets the love and support that we are looking for. And thank you so much for watching. And Maria, take us home.
Take you home. We're home. It's a party every time. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Like Lucy said, bringing the awareness to our community is so important to us. And anytime we get the chance to have these kind of candid conversations, especially among military women, we're honored and humbled by that. So thank you so much, everyone that joined. Thank you guys. And yeah, we'll catch you on the streets.
All right. See you in the cyber world.
Yeah. And we'll be watching out for Monday's news. We'll send you all the good news.
Oh yes, please do.
Yes, definitely. Thank you all.
Thank you.